Well, I'm going to start the introduction of this webinar. We are at how to smartly invest while living abroad in 2022, the year we have just started. As I said, my name is Judith Romera. I'm a member of the City Promotion Team at Barcelona City Council. This webinar is the first activity of the year organized by Barcelona International Welcome, which is the program addressed at international community living in our city. We wanted to organize this event on site, to meet, to have the opportunity to network and discuss face-to-face. We had agreed to celebrate this event at Talent Garden, which is a great co-working space located in the 22 at the Barcelona Innovation District.
So that you are on mute.
You're mute. We can hear you.
It's okay now?
Yep. No, I can hear you.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Okay, sorry. Well, I was telling that we had scheduled this session in a Talent Garden co-working space that we had this nicely agreement to organize events at the space, but due to the COVID, we decided to hold on an online event, and here we are. First of all, this event is being recorded because we wanted to upload it in a few days in our YouTube list at Barcelona International Welcome list, so you can check later if you like. And also the speaker will share the presentation, okay? Well, this topic today is quite practical, of interest of all people that have moved to live in other countries, the expats, the remote workers, the foreign people who have moved abroad. And we focus now here in Barcelona. And when you move to a new city, you need to sort out many needs, many questions. And one is finance, your personal investments or your savings. And you have to figure out how to save, how to plan for your future, maybe to invest, and so on. And this can be tricky, can be complex, because the financial market sometimes is complex and there are many products, and also is the trust. You have to trust the operator. And to discuss about these issues, we have today an expert person, an investment advisors, and a specialist. We are very happy to have Elliot Locke, which is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Abroaden. And well, I'm gonna give the floor to him to give this presentation.
Hi, Judith.
Okay.
Excellent. Hi. Thank you all for joining. I really appreciate that you're taking time on your Tuesday afternoon to listen to me talk. And I really want to thank the Barcelona International Welcome Team for organizing this event. Again, it would be nice if we had done it in person, but I think playing it safe right now is probably the better strategy. And hopefully in a few months, we'll all be able to meet up in person. But yeah, let's get to it. I'm going to just share my screen really fast. And we should be good to go. Okay, hi, excellent. Thank you again for joining. So yeah, my name is Elliot Locke. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Abroaden. But on top of being an entrepreneur, I'm an investment advisor and a finance nerd. And it's kind of in those last two subjects that I really want to dive into today because I think they're really fascinating and also think like, we don't really understand them as well as we should. So how I'm going to go through this today is I want to cover what's happened in the economy in the past year or so, what we can expect going forward, as that's going to help us put our minds in the right spot, and then go over some tips and some points that I think are really fantastic ways to help you build your wealth and reach your financial goals, whatever they are. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat. I'm hoping we'll be able to get to a Q&A at the end of this. We should be able to. And as Judith was saying, we have a downloadable guide with not only the slides here, but explanations about what we went over that we'll put in the chat at the end. So thank you again, and let's hop to it. So first off, what the hell just happened? So we have been through the strangest 2 years in our lifetimes for sure, and some of the strangest too in human history, especially modern human history. While we were all stuck at home, kind of figuring out how we were going to start getting out of this mess, global stock markets continuously hit new records. Last year, there were over 70 days where a global stock market broke a new record. And many times, that same stock market broke multiple records throughout the years. We wouldn't believe it because we were either stuck at home or we were certainly not living in what we thought were a normal life. But the global economy, at least measured by stock markets, were doing quite well. Very, very odd, but it was sort of this counter statement to what was happening during the pandemic. We can thank a lot of that to a year plus of pandemic support provided by governments. So we all remember during that very scary part of March of 2020, which was, I can't believe that was almost 2 years ago. Governments came quickly to the rescue, and they provided support not only to companies, but more importantly, to individuals. If you had to go on to unemployment or your company had to shut down, we were very quick to provide that safety net. That prevented what would have been surely the deepest depression we would have ever seen, and probably would have cleared what happened 90 years ago. And yet that stimulus of cash combined with us shifting our consumer habits created this huge demand for goods. We went from shopping online, which we became experts at in 2020 and continued that through 2021. And that drove up huge demand at factories, huge demand with logistics companies, airlines who were stuck, not able to fly passengers, shifted into flying cargo around. And yet, even with all of that extra capacity, it created supply chain issues where receiving goods that we ordered can take weeks and months instead of the average days. And at the same time, last year we saw energy prices skyrocket. We were in this very weird situation, we'll cover it here a little bit below, where electricity prices hit new highs as we weren't able to generate enough green electricity to meet our goals, and some weather events caused us to get in a situation where we literally weren't able to have enough reserve backup fossil fuel to provide enough capacity to meet the demand. And then all of this kind of came together to give us the highest inflation of the century, well, at least in Europe, and that we've seen, at least for many of us in our adult lifetimes. And I'm going to cover this a little bit more below. So now with all of that, it kind of brought us into where we are today, here in 2022. And again, inflation, energy prices, supply chains, along with the pandemic, these are themes that are still continuing this year. So here are some things that we're watching and that I think is worth keeping an eye on. That's going to help us make better financial investment decisions as we go on. So first, China's pandemic management and the supply chain backlog is going to be an overriding theme as we look at how we shift through the management of delays in getting goods, delays in producing goods, microchips, components, whatever is coming out of the world's indisputable export powerhouse. Now, we know China is still holding on to this zero COVID policy, right? Like where even for like 1 or 2 cases, they'll easily shut down entire cities. And the issue with that is when they do that, they also shut ports and factories. This happened notably in August of last year when one of the largest ports in China was closed for 5 weeks. And it took us until around November to clear that backlog. Well, now the issue is where pretty much the rest of the world has accepted that with the tools we have right now, the vaccines, the antiviral treatments, and other methods, we can kind of accept that people are going to get infected. And it will just happen. China isn't there yet. Until they get into that spot, and it's a very politically complicated decision for the leadership there to make, they're going to continue with this policy of of on off with their factory and export capacity. When they shift to a more endemic management style, then that will help take some of that pressure off. Thing is, we don't know when that's going to happen, and it's certainly worth keeping an eye on. Second point, and this is especially important for us here in Europe, is how we decide to go green. So as I was saying, we had this issue last year where there wasn't enough capacity in the renewable energies and wind and solar to provide us with the electricity we needed. The sun didn't shine in Northern Europe, and then the wind didn't blow. And that caused us to fall back to our default fossil fuel for keeping capacity, and that's natural gas. The problem is we burned through most of our reserves over the summer when we should have been stockpiling it, which led to the situation where we got to winter, and it gets cold in Europe, and we needed that gas to heat our homes, and we still needed that to provide this backup electricity. And unfortunately, because we didn't have the reserves, we've been having to buy in the market, and that's been causing prices to go up. I'm sure you've probably seen your electricity, and if you have gas bills go higher. That's really what was behind that. Now, right now, at the same time, we know that there's a climate crisis, right? We know that there's issues behind it. In fact, it came out at the end of last year that the number one driver of inflation was really the weather, extreme weather events that just created this volatility, either shutting down through severe storms, shutting down the power grid, severe weather and storms preventing shipping lanes from operating at full efficiency. And yeah, we know this is very important. So what's happening right now in the EU is that we're trying to figure out how we're going to meet our goals of 2050 zero carbon emission economy. And right now in Brussels, there's a debate on what tools we can use in the interim to get us there. And that debate's really centered on nuclear and natural gas. The problem is we need at least one of those to be able to provide this backup electricity, and so we can add enough capacity, enough solar, enough wind that we won't be dependent on it. And for that, the European Union is deciding what's green and what's not. Once they decide on that, then they'll be able to give investors a guideline on what they can invest on that meets these green goals. This debate is very politically charged. The French are very pro-nuclear, the Germans aren't, and yet we need to have at least one decision on what should be included and not. And until we have that figured out, we are going to see energy companies taking a very short-term view on what energy sources they're going to buy from, as well as us as investors, if we want to invest in green sources, not having a lot of guidance about what we should be doing long-term. Next, we have the inflation story, and this is one you've probably at least heard of. Maybe you've even felt it, and it's that we have seen in the past couple months the highest inflation since really the introduction of the euro here, and it goes like this: that these prices are going up, everything's increasing, it's bad news. My take on that is that we're not actually looking at this picture properly, and we're distorting the views. So I like to go on and dive into the data, and the European Central Bank provides a wonderful dashboard, and there's a link to this in the downloadable guide that goes over the different components of the economy and about what is feeling the most pressure. And a couple points to keep in mind. First, the headline view that we're looking at, the one that makes the news, is the annual inflation rate. And what that means is they're comparing what happened, say, December of 2021 to December of 2020. The problem with that is December 2020 and 2020 in general was not a normal year. And it was followed up by another extraordinarily bizarre year. And making these sort of year-to-year comparisons gives us this very weird view of what's going on. In this table right here that I took from the European Central Bank, for example, it's showing that household electricity, gas prices, and transport are overwhelmingly driving inflation. Well, if we compare this to a year ago, to December 2020, we weren't traveling then. We were all in lockdown of some sorts. Borders are effectively shut. Here in Spain, we weren't even really allowed to go more than 2 municipalities over. So at that time, it would make sense that airfare was at record low prices. And then compared to this past Christmas, where we were all able to travel, it is very normal that we see prices there go up. Same thing when we talk about energy prices. The energy inflation that we saw in natural gas and other electricity, that all happened in the last half of last year. So again, last December, yes, it was less expensive, but the situation wasn't very comparable. Central bankers, the people who control the temperature of the economy, they aim to have generally 2% inflation annually. That's a good number because it means the economy is growing, salaries are going up, jobs are being created, but the cost of living is still quite manageable. If you take out housing, electricity, and gas, and transport, you can see that we more or less hit that. And the places that were putting out pressure, such as recreation and culture, and going out to eat, staying in hotels, well, we weren't really doing that last year either. And yeah, so again, you look at like what we'll see in the news, and this is the annual changes in inflation going up until November when we had the last official stats. And yeah, it looks quite scary, especially here towards the end where it shoots up like that. But what I think is the better measurement and what a lot of economists look at is what's happening month to month, right? We want to know what happened, say, in December compared to November. And looking at the data going all the way back to the year 2000, we're still more or less normal. It's going up just a little bit now, but it's following the same cyclical pattern that we see each year. And more interestingly, the bands that we see in the past few years are a little bit shorter than the last time we had a financial crisis. Well, we had multiple crises the last decade in Europe, and around 2015 was probably the strongest one for the euro, where Greece almost left the group. And that's really what we're seeing playing out here. But in general, the month-to-month data is showing that things are much better than they seem, even if there's a lot of pressure, which again is attributed to a growing economy that isn't really apparent because the pandemic and the health situation don't reflect that. On that, though, another topic we're really looking at are interest rates and exchange rates. And I'd imagine that some of you on this call, you might be earning different currencies than euros. So maybe you're working remotely for an American or a British company, you get dollars or pounds, and you watch the exchange rate a lot. People ask me quite often, what's going to happen with the exchange rate, where it's going to go. I can't really say that. It's impossible to predict. But what we can say is that we can look at what's going to happen to the main drivers of the exchange rate. And that's the interest rates that central banks set to help control the economy. So central bankers, again, these wizards who pretty much dictate what the economy does, they'll do two things if they want to manage the economy with interest rates. So if they want to cool it off, if they think inflation's a bit too high, they raise the interest rates. And then that way people say, you know what, I'm going to take my cash out of the market. I'm going to stop spending it. I'm going to save it because I'm going to get a little bit more in my savings account than I would if I put it out in the general economy. And when they want to get things going, if things are moving fast enough, they drop the rates. They keep them low and low and low. And we saw this the past 10 years. We're here in Europe, depending on where you are, the interest rate that you get on your savings account is zero or even negative. And the idea is like they say, all right, get the money out of the bank, spend it, or even better, invest it. And yeah, so right now, what we think is going to happen is that because inflation is moving at a level that does need some sort of attention from the governments, from the central banks, they're going to start raising interest rates. And when that happens, big investors, banks, financial institutions, hedge funds, they're going to want to park their money where they get the most return. And they're going to start buying different currencies. So let's say like this year, it's widely expected that the US will raise interest rates 3 times. When that happens, these big institutions are going to start buying dollars, and they're going to increase the demand for dollars, and that will strengthen the dollar versus the euro. Now, and then at another point, well, maybe the European Central Bank does the same. It's expected they'll start talking about it later this year in the summer. We'll know in probably the fall if it does happen. And then, yeah, the Bank of England, the central bank for the British pound, will be doing something very similar this year. So, if you're going to be watching exchange rates, and you really shouldn't be refreshing that every second to see where it's going, because it will drive you insane. But to look at what's going to happen with interest rates and with what central banks are saying, it's going to give you a pretty good idea of where the exchange rate could be going. And then finally, there's the pandemic X factor. I have no idea when this is going to end. I hope no one joined the call thinking I was going to have an answer to that. And like I remember we gave a similar talk over the fall. We did it between end of September and end of November, and it went from, yeah, things are looking good, towards, hey, some countries are going into restrictions, to Omicron. And again, we just didn't see it coming. So we know very well by now that this virus is going to do what it wants. Hopefully we're heading towards the end, but we don't know. What is very interesting to see, though, is that we as humans, we don't really adapt our behavior based on restrictions, but unless we're absolutely forced to, but more on our perception of the virus and how it impacts us. At the very beginning of the pandemic, where this was all very new and scary, we were extraordinarily careful about our behavior. We were very, we slowed down. We were quite okay to be at home, even if it was not a comfortable experience. Now, it's quite odd because we are seeing some of the highest caseloads in the history of this pandemic, and yet people are still more or less carrying on with their lives. And it shows that, their behaviors aren't reflecting a fear of it, which means that the economy probably isn't going to slow down. Again, I don't have an answer as to what will happen, but it will definitely be dictating what happens in the global economy and the European economy throughout the year. So with that stuff in mind, I want to go over these tips I was talking about that I think are going to help you make more informed financial decisions. They're going to give you a better idea of what you can do financially, and will help you, at least, I hope, if anything, sleep a little bit better at night as we go through this year and beyond. So first, money is immensely psychological for us. It's very emotional. Despite it just being numbers, it has a huge impact on our lives. The best thing you can do before you make any financial decision, whether it be opening up your bank account on your app or making a big investment, is take a couple deep breaths, get your head balanced, and be able to think as rationally, or even better, reasonably as you can, and let that dictate your decisions and not your emotions. Once you've done that, the most important thing you need to do is find out what your risk limits are. Investing is all about getting the most return for the lowest risk possible. That's what we call the efficient frontier in investing. And it's extraordinarily important because, well, why take more risk than you should, right? Yet, if you go over your risk limits, if you make an investment that is outside of it, you're going to start losing sleep. You're going to start having your life impacted. There's a Canadian financial psychologist who's done extensive studies on the psychology of money and the psychology of like how we see wealth and how it impacts us. And her findings revealed that when we're stressed about money, when we're at the point where we're losing sleep, when it's dictating our lives, when we've taken too much risk, it knocks 10% off of our IQ temporarily. So knowing where that limit is extraordinarily important. And conversely, if you don't go up to that limit, then you're not getting as much return as you're probably comfortable getting with. We have in the guide a little tool that will help you find out where your risk tolerance is. It gives you, an idea of where your profile is. So you're either very conservative or very adventurous or a balanced investor. It makes some recommendations about what type of investments could probably be interesting for you to look at. Again, I'll share this at the end of the presentation, but again, knowing your risk and what risk you're comfortable with is the first step you want to take whenever you're going to make any investment or financial decision. With that in mind, you also want to go through and define your goals with a purpose, right? When you're going to make any sort of investment or make your money work for you, you want to have an idea of where you want to go, where you want to do, and how you want to accomplish it. Now, it doesn't have to be very complex, especially when you're quite young, you have a long time to go in your lifetime. You just need to say, all right, well, this is what I want to do with it. Is that I want to invest in my retirement, or I want to save up so I can take a year off from work and travel the world, or I want to buy a house, so I need to put some money aside to, have enough capital to make that happen. Again, it doesn't have to be complex. You could even say, I want to have more money later on. And, I say later on being 15 years from now. But unless you define the goal, you're not going to be able to find the right investments for you. And on that, you need to find investments that are matched with your goals, and not all are created equal. First, depending on when your investment goal is, will determine what sort of investments you should be looking at. If you are trying to save and grow your wealth for something 30 years from now, you can take a lot more risk. You can accept that over time you have a better chance of coming out on top. Now, if you want to save for something 6 months from now, chances are you probably want to avoid investing into most stocks, exotic things like cryptos, really anything that has almost any risks to it. Even within that space, there are broad differences. Not all investment funds are created equally. Not all. Once you have an idea, of what your goals are, you're going to need to start looking into investments and different investment classes to meet them. I love ETFs because they're, well, not only do they cross borders very well, but they're just wonderfully built, incredibly efficient products. If you don't know what an ETF is, it's short for exchange traded fund. Kind of to break that down in reverse, a fund is just a collective investment where a bunch of random investors pool their money together and they go out and invest in whatever theme that they think could grow their wealth. By theme, it could be something as broad as a giant stock index, so like the S&P 500 in the US, which is the 500 biggest public companies in the United States, the stocks 600, which is very similar, but here in Europe, the FTSE 100, or even little tiny, very specific themes like I want to invest in just biotech stocks. Well, people can quickly pool their money together, they get purchasing power, and they can buy into different companies and different investments in there that provides diversification. The exchange traded part means that these funds, unlike an index fund or a CCAV or a mutual fund where you have to buy it through a specialized seller, ETFs trade on stock exchange traded. That means if you want to invest in one, all you have to do is go to a stockbroker or to a trading app and find the ETF you want to invest in and purchase it. It's done. You can see the price right away. They're extraordinarily transparent. You see what's inside of it. You see the fees. You know where your money's going to work. They're wonderful tools. And as I was saying, what's really great for them for people living abroad is that if you move to a different country at one point, these come with you very easily. Most of the popular ETFs here in Europe are registered across the EU. That means that you're not going to get into a situation where it might get stuck with you. Where, for example, here in Spain, like if you go to like your bank and you're to buy one of their pension plans, it was only registered here in Spain. That means that if you're to move to the Netherlands, you wouldn't necessarily be able to take that with you or keep contributing to it, while the ETF would come with you. And because they recognize it there, the tax reporting is much easier. As they trade like stocks, the rules on trading stocks and the taxes underneath are also very transparent. You have ETFs that take almost zero risk, investing in the governments of Western Europe, the United States, to the most exotic ones out there that would invest in, I don't know, think of the craziest thing you could think of. There's probably an ETF for it. There's over 6,000 ETFs, and I think there's like 2 or 3 new ones a week. So it's a fast-growing financial sphere of products. And really, that's, if I'm a person living abroad, that's where I'm looking. Diversification is obviously going to be your best friend, right? So when we talk about diversification in investing, we're talking about the fact that you want to spread out your investments so they're not all tightly connected with each other, right? The idea is that if one goes down, the rest of them will either stay up or stay even. And that means that you can take a lot more risk than you would get if you're only investing in 1 or 2 different individual things like a stock or a piece of gold or a cryptocurrency. By diversifying your risk, you pretty much, by diversifying your risk, you're almost eliminating every risk you can think of except broad market risk. Again, ETFs or other funds are fantastic at this because they have diversification built in. As I say, like one of the most popular ones will invest in the 500 biggest companies in the US. Right now, those are invested, the biggest ones are invested in Apple, Meta, Facebook, whatever you want to call it, Alphabet. But outside of this, the tech companies, they're invested in every other sector. They're in healthcare, industrials, manufacturing, commerce, retail, sectors that as the economy goes through its usual business cycle, do perform differently. Diversification in this sense means that whatever's happening, you're going to get the average return, saves you a lot of the headache and a lot of the extra risk, minimizing the chance of you losing money and maximizing the chance that you're going to reach your goals. So once you have all of that in mind, once you figured out what your risk tolerance is, what your goals are, and you found the products, by products, the investments that you think you need to make to reach your goals, you're going to want to set up a strategy so that you can pay yourself later on. Pay yourself first is this wonderful tool. I love it because it's so simple and yet it's underrated. And what it means is like you have, your future goal, your future self, you want to have ideally more cash than you have right now. The best way you can do that is to set up a foolproof way of automating your investment strategy, right? So once you've, again, determined what you're going to invest in, you set up a direct debit each month on your bank account on the day you get paid. Let's say that you decide you're going to pay 300 euros a month into an investment strategy. Well, you set up this direct debit, so it goes from your bank account directly into your investment account, and it purchases whatever investments that you've decided that you want to invest in. The beauty of it is you don't have to do anything. And the problem is when you have to do something, especially when it involves money leaving your bank account, you either hesitate or you get lazy. Hesitation and laziness are a fantastic way to kill your investment strategy. It's a great way to keep you from preventing your goals. And yet, by automating this process where you can't even touch this money, you have already set yourself up to succeed at the highest level possible. It's very easy to do. I think every bank now offers this sort of service. I highly recommend it. You can even do it to set up for savings accounts. If you want to, if you're still trying to figure out, well, hey, what do I want to invest in, but you don't want to touch the money, you can automatically just drop it into a savings account. Now, we get the question a lot, okay, cool, I can pay myself first, but what money should I be putting aside each month? And how do I figure out, what I should be saving, what I should be spending? There's this wonderful rule called 50-30-20. And it goes like this. So 50% of your income, of your salary, should be going towards your basic living expenses, your rent or your mortgage, your utilities, your essential food, basic clothing, that stuff you need to live. 30% of it should go for having fun, right? There's no sense in not having fun. We only live once. You work hard for the money, you should enjoy it, save it for going out to eat, buying stuff you don't really need, but you want, traveling, trips, whatever will help you have a more fulfilling life. And then that remaining 20% is what you can save or invest. It's a really simple calculation. Obviously, you can adjust it to your needs. If you have, a more ambitious goal, you can flip that around where, you spend 20% for having fun and 30% into your investment accounts. But it's a really, really easy way to calculate it, and combined with pay yourself first, you can put pretty much your financial goals on autopilot. Now, having covered some of these good things to follow, there are a couple pitfalls that you probably want to avoid if you want to improve your chances for success and avoid losing sleep. So first, savings accounts aren't really saving you anything. I'm originally from the United States, but I moved to Europe in 2002 to Belgium, and eventually I got tired of the cold weather and moved down here. But what I really realized here in Europe is we have this sort of cultural obsession of saving and not investing. And there is quite a big difference between the two. Saving means you're just putting money aside to keep it safe. Whereas in investing, you're taking money that you have right now, putting it somewhere else, and hoping to grow it into a lot more money later on. And the problem is with savings accounts is A, they don't grow, and B, they don't beat inflation. Even if inflation was quite low, you're still never going to get to anywhere in a savings account that will enable you to preserve the value of your money, the real value of your money. Instead, savings accounts should be used to keep your rainy day fund, your emergency fund. And I recommend keeping between 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a savings account. You don't want that money to be at risk. You want to be able to take it whenever you need it without any having to go through and sell stocks or sell any investment you have, which could potentially require you to pay taxes on it. Just keep it there safe. But as soon as you have that built up and enough to keep you comfortable, you can start looking at different ways to invest it. Again, it's something culturally here that we're not quite there yet to do, but it's definitely worth being aware of that, a savings account has a use, but it's a very limited one at that. Second, don't give a shit about what other people are doing. This is very difficult, especially in the age of social media and the age that we live in, where we have answers to pretty much any question you could think of at our fingertips, providing us with a wonderfully confusing experience. The problem is like what we read online, what we see others doing is made for other people. Right now on this call, we have 50 people, right? There's 50 people with 50 different risk profiles, 50 different investment goals, 50 different preferences, 50 different needs, right? There's not one person online who's going to be able to write on whatever forum, on Reddit, on Quora, any like Oracle level advice that you should be doing to reach your goals. Instead of just blindly following someone else's investment strategies, it's best to do your research, look at what you think you need, find out more about those products and those investments and those goals, and build what works for you. Again, going back towards the whole risk and finding your goal, that's a very personal experience, right? And you need to make sure you keep that as personalized as possible with you, because if everyone keeps following others blindly, it leads towards bubbles. And the problem with bubbles is they burst and people get hurt. Right now, again, we're in a bubble of, here in Europe, there's a cryptocurrency bubble that's being brought along by NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which is a whole other webinar worth of talk. In the US, and again, a bit over here in Europe, you see some meme stocks or whatever's happening on social media, people will be trying to just have some fun with some cash, where they're just betting on what the markets will do, but people will happen to, who don't have that sort of like gambling mentality, will invest in these products. They'll invest maybe their life savings in some cryptos or in some stocks. And what will happen is the people having fun, they get out whenever they feel like it. They have a short-term goal, they take a quick profit. And that leads to these massive sell-offs and bubbles burst. And the problem is most of the time when people who aren't in it for the fun of it get in, they're in too late, and they get out way too late, and they're left holding an asset that's either worthless or worth way less than they paid for it. So if you're going to go have some fun, and I don't know, you want to do something speculative, like invest in some cryptos or invest in some stocks, that's fine. Just make sure you're only doing it with enough money you're comfortable losing, right? Again, you don't want to lose any sleep over it. You don't want to do like some people in the U.S. have done, where they've taken out a second mortgage on their house and invested it all in like GameStop stocks, which is just, it's wow. Like I hope it works out for them, but please avoid that. And on that, there's scams that come along too, especially here in the crypto space. You're seeing a lot of very interesting social media and ads that are trying to promote like new services, new tools, new investments. Most of these are scams, and you have to really do your homework, do your due diligence. I saw on Instagram the other day an ad for Disneyverse, right? So yeah, Walt Disney, and it was selling NFTs to a virtual Disney World. So you'd have like a digital certificate of a virtual world. And I was like, that's interesting. So I took a look and saw what was in there. And yeah, it was a domain that was registered the day before. It had nothing to do with Disney, but it's just a very nicely done website. And obviously that was a scam. And the way that they did it, though, it makes it very hard to understand that, especially if you don't have sort of a financial background. Other thing, again, going into NFTs, on our Instagram page, we promoted a blog post we wrote about NFTs, and within seconds. And again, if anyone wants to get a lot of followers really fast on Instagram, just tag it #NFT. But we had like 30 bots just like us and comment. And like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. And then we started getting invited to like these different communities. One of it was called Pumps, when what they wanted you to do is join them in their crypto world of pumping up the price of a share and then selling it high. And we call that in finance a pump and dump. And many governments call that illegal. So the people doing this can very well go to jail if they get caught. And again, they're out there to harm regular investors. So there are these scams. Again, do your homework and be careful. If you can keep that in mind, I'm sure you'll have financial success otherwise. So that's about it. Do we have any questions? I would love to answer them, and maybe if we have time, we can have a little, open the floor. So,
hello. I think we have time. Maybe we
Okay.
can ask questions if some people want to open the camera and of course the micro. Otherwise, they can write down. There has been information about the ETF.
Sure. Okay, I see the chat. Yeah. So, any recommendations App To Buy ETF? I haven't heard of GoTrade. I'll look it up. There's a few different ones out there. DeGiro is one of the more popular ones because it's very low cost, and they have a selection of, I think, 100 ETFs that you can invest in each month. I don't have any affiliation with them, but I know that it's one of the more popular ones out there, and they're a properly licensed broker. I have heard that their onboarding experience and their UX is not great. There are some other ones as well, depending on what country you're in. Trade Republic is very popular in Germany and Austria, and I think they're in the UK. What's very important, though, with a lot of these different apps is you need to make sure if you're investing in the ETF itself, or if you're invested in what's known as a CFD, or a contract for difference. And this is what's known as a binary options contract that enables you to bet on the performance of the ETF without actually letting you own the ETF. So in essence, like the benefit of many ETFs is they'll pay a dividend, or they'll pay income, or they'll reinvest those profits. So you get this wonderful impact of compounded interest. The problem is if you're invested into a CFD, you don't get any of that. And many of these are registered in not the nicest of locations. But I would look at the DeGiro. I think is probably a good start, even if the UX isn't the greatest. Okay, I'll just go down the list. Would you advise to invest within or maybe outside of the EU? In terms of diversification, I would definitely recommend, again, depending on your goal, geographical diversification is a wonderful tool. Again, different economies will run at different speeds. The US, the EU, the developing world, they all have different features to them, and they don't all act in unison. And there are tons of ETFs out there that will give you that diversified possibility. In terms of investing using a company outside of the EU, I would be very careful, because once you are, depending on where you are, the jurisdiction might not have a lot of investor protection. And that could mean that, say, if something goes wrong, or if like the broker or the investment provider goes bankrupt, you might not be able to get as much money back as what would happen here in Europe. IRA retirement accounts and how those work across borders. I love IRAs. I wish we had these here. IRA stands for individual retirement account. Those are very similar to the UK's ISA accounts, individual savings accounts. And these are what we call a tax-free wrapper that enables you to invest a certain amount of money each month into stocks, bonds, ETFs, pretty much anything in the United States, without having to pay tax on it, right? So you can buy and sell, and anything that happens inside that, there's no tax hit. The most popular one, the Roth IRA, you can contribute up to $6,000 a year of your post-tax money. And then when you get to your retirement, because you can't touch it until you turn 60 years old, you don't pay any tax on it either, which is amazing. So like it's more or less tax-free retirement money. Unfortunately, we don't have a European-wide version of this, and I would love to see the EU do that, because I think it would open up investing to other people. The bigger issue with those is that because they wrap the taxes and they shelter them, different countries will see them differently, and they could see that as a way of you cheating your taxes, or at least hiding assets. Here in Europe, and again, these are only for Americans, the ISA accounts. There's ways to make your taxes efficient where you can keep contributing to them. And with the tax treaty between the US and Spain, they can still work. If you have access to an ISA, IRA account, and you can still contribute to it, by all means do it. If you can't, there are other ways to do it. There's just taxes involved. The names of the ETFs. What I can do is I can provide I have a little downloadable on the different, like the top 5 ETFs we think investors can use to get started. Really meant for people abroad. I can put that in there. Bucks. Yeah, I've heard of Bucks. That it does look quite cool. I don't know enough about it to make a full recommendation. Again, what's important is with whatever app you're using to make sure the investments you're investing are what you think you're getting. And I would look out, again, like a lot of we see in Europe are CFDs and cryptos instead of the actual investment itself. But just make sure, like when you read the fine print, you're actually investing in what you think you are. Oh yeah, it was DeGiro. That was the first one. Okay, so you talk about the 50-30-20 rule. Where would you say paying off a mortgage fits into that? So I would say for sure that's in the 50. That's something you're going to want to pay first. It's debt. And actually, until you pay it off, your house isn't really an asset, it's a liability because the bank can eventually take it from you because that's the collateral against the loan. So I would definitely pay that one off first. That would be in the 50. And we save one wage, use one wage for living, keeping the leftovers, and put 10 to 15% into stocks and cryptos. So right now, is it best to pay the loans or increase investments? That would really depend on the interest rate you have on your mortgage. What's really cool now is that interest rates and mortgage rates are very low. So having a mortgage of like under 2%, that's pretty good. I own my apartment here with my wife. We got it a few years back and we're looking to refinance it now under 2%. That's our goal for this next 3 months. But I would say if that's a very manageable rate, I would just keep servicing the mortgage and keep investing in higher risk investment, depending on your goal. 1.5% is, that's great. I would just keep that as is because it's not going to get much lower. The European Central Bank doesn't like these negative rates, which is also kind of interesting. Is what's happened is like the last financial crisis, the bailouts were with the banks, and then we went through austerity. And there's obviously pros and cons of the austerity process, but probably the biggest takeaway for us as individuals is there is no bailout to consumers, right? And there is this need to say, hey, well, we're going to cut off the taps. We're not going to be spending on people. And the problem is if you want to really manage an economy, you need to have some sort of government expenditure balanced with central banks acting, what they call monetary policy. Right, and we only had monetary policy during up until the pandemic, and that's why interest rates were so low. The central banks were literally screaming, "Government, do something, spend some money, get people to do this," and they didn't. And I think we came to the consensus that maybe we should be spending money as governments, is what they call fiscal policies. But definitely with some cash saved up, I would put that into whatever your investment goal is. That would be how I would do that. I have some speaker notes with, I can tell you a little bit about us while we're at it. So abroad, we're creating a wealth building platform for people living abroad. So like our idea is to make this whole process of finding, making, and managing investments while you live abroad much easier, right? So we do a lot of the research for you. We find the investments that fit your needs, help you set up the management of it. And then whenever you move countries, we can move all of this with you. So, really what you have to focus on is building your career or enjoying the life you want to live and not having to worry about extra tax reporting, extra headaches, losing access to your funds. Really trying to make that easier for everyone. We're based here in Barcelona. We actually went through the F10 FinTech Incubator Program. This is quite cool. It's it's a program that was originally out of Switzerland, and then the Swiss stock owned by the Swiss Stock Exchange Company, and they bought the Spanish Stock Exchange Company back in 2020 and decided to bring this program here. And they had their first ever batch here in Barcelona. Really cool experience. If anyone has a question about starting a company or going through an incubator, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to share my thoughts on that. We're also doing a program backed by the EU right now, which has introduced us to different startups across the continent, like a lot of people in the Baltics, a lot in Poland and Central Europe, Hungary. So it's quite cool. As I was saying, yeah, we have, I'm going to drop the link right now in the chat. So I have the presentation with a lot more explanations on everything. On top of that, there's the tool to calculate your risk tolerance in there. I think it's around slide 16. Well, you'll find it. And I see there's some more questions on here too. The 3 best ETFs. It really depends on what you want to do. There are, I'll put that in the chat as well, but there's, sure, I'll drop the contact info in here. So ETFs, what you really want to do is, again, depending on what your goals are, if you're looking for a longer term, really diversified investment, something, without anything to think about, there's a couple out there that you can invest in the entire global stock market without having to do more than one transaction a month, which I think is really, really good. There are some ones that are focused exclusively on the US. What's interesting is that these like global ETFs, like these all world ETFs, 60% of them are the United States. And what you can do is just invest in that to begin with, and then build around that. What I think is quite interesting here in Europe is real estate tends to do better than stocks because we're insane about real estate on this side of the world. So investing in those makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of healthy economy for that here in Europe. In terms of like lower risk ones, there are low volatility funds. So you invest in stocks, but the ones that aren't so up and down, and they still get good return, but it helps you sleep a little bit better at night. For ETF rookies, tips for getting started. To look at the level of the risk the ETF has to be identified. So actually in each ETF, the fund issuer has to provide what's known as a key information document. And Judith and I were actually talking about this before the call, that these documents are horrible because they're very difficult to read, but they try to do it. That said, there is a standard in Europe that all investments have to be on a scale between 1 and 7, 1 being like there is no risk to 7 being you're a cowboy, and generally like that will give you a good idea of how much risk you're going to be taking in it. With that said, the younger ones, they're a little bit harder to read because, like, for example, an ETF that came out in 2019 went like this when the stock market crashed right when the lockdown started and then soared back up. So there's not a lot of data out there, but you can look for similar funds. JustETF.com is a really cool website. I can just drop that here. It has a lot of information on ETFs in Europe. Really, really good for doing some research. Again, you can go onto the documents of each fund, and then that will give you a little bit more information. That risk scale, that has to be there. It's always on the first page, and it will tell you exactly what sort of risks an ETF has. What do I think of REITs in Spain? I think they're generally a good investment. REIT stands for Real Estate Investment Trust. The IBEX 35, which is the stock index of the 35 biggest companies in Spain, has a lot of real estate companies in there. I think there are REIT ETFs, which are very useful for that. So what these do is they invest in companies that manage and own real estate. And that way you can get kind of the benefit of the return on the real estate with actually having to manage it. I know there's one that has invest in real estate across Europe, and I was digging through the fund, and you can own a very small slice of like 35 Condis supermarkets here in Spain. among other ones in there, which is really a great way to get this sort of investment without getting stuck with real estate. And for us living abroad, you don't want to get in a position where you're owning direct real estate, a toilet breaks and you have to fly halfway around the world to fix it, because that will really ruin your bottom line. And if you give me just a second, I'm going to pull up the guide we have on ETFs, and I can share that with you. If you give me just a second, I have to log into our dashboard. So far, it's been a really wonderful time chatting with all of you. I hope we didn't have a lot of people dropping out of the call. It's happened to me before. So, okay, posts. And to contact us, you can reach me on LinkedIn. I have my contact information at the bottom of the downloadable, as well as reaching us on Instagram. And yeah, Instagram and LinkedIn are where we're at. We haven't braved onto Facebook yet, but we should probably do that at some point. Okay. 1 second, almost there. So for Spain, it's the 35 biggest. It's the IBEX 35. There are ETFs out there, but that's a stock index. REIT stands for Real Estate Investment Trust. In terms of REITs, there's a really good one. I think it's in the guide. But if not, send me a message and I'll be happy to share it with you. Yes, I've heard of a PEP. Those are cool. Planned European Pension Plans. So this is this new directive to make pension plans across Europe standardized. It's just now coming out. I think it's a really good idea. And to be honest, like what we'd love to do as a company later on is to create a PEP specifically for people living abroad. So companies can invest in these pension plans for their employees, and when they go to another country, it goes with them. I know this has happened to me. For example, I have a pension plan in Belgium where I worked in a bank that is stuck in Belgium, and I would have preferred to move it here, but it doesn't have registration here. But yeah, that's really cool.
Well, I think there has been a lot of questions, a lot of interest. For me, it has been quite interesting to listen to your tips, your forecast, your analysis of the economic situation. And I think it has been quite interesting. Thanks, Elliot, for sharing your presentation.
Oh, my pleasure.
And giving a lot of tips. This amazing. We're gonna save the chat, and we will download the documents so it can be helpful to others that maybe had missed the webinar, but they can see and check the video. Okay, so thank you for participating to all the one has been with us this afternoon. I hope you can join to the new events, activities that we are going to organize this year. So thank you, Elliot. And
my pleasure. Thank you all. Thank you all for showing up and listening to me. And I look forward to meeting you, hopefully in person sometime this year.
Yes, hopefully we can organize face-to-face meeting, because I really feel like meeting people again in this kind of events.
We were so close. Okay.
Okay. So thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.